And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Hockey Sense. Brought to you by First Community. We are live in the Half Coast Studios. If you want to record a podcast and have your own podcast, hit me up. I'll get you in touch with the good people here at Half Coast Studios. It's the summer. We continue on with Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. We have a good time. Last week, we had Doug Armstrong on. He was phenomenal. Check out everything you're looking for on all your podcast platforms, including YouTube, where you can find this episode. We got a great show planned for you here today. Sam Goodwin. Local people here in St. Louis are familiar with the name because he is part of the Goodwin family. Big-time hockey family here in St. Louis. He played Division I hockey at Niagara University. And he's got an incredible story. He was held hostage for 9 weeks in Syria. Yeah, you may have heard the story. This is after his hockey playing career. He's over in Singapore. He's teaching hockey. He's doing some other things. He's involved in some businesses. He'll fill us in and tell us exactly what he was doing. And he was on a quest to visit every country in the world. I think he visited 193 countries. I asked Alexa last night how many countries there are. Apparently there's 195. So I don't know if he has 2 more to go, or if Alexa's wrong, we'll ask him. Because I believe he's been to every country in the world, one of like 100 people in the history of civilization to accomplish that. And that includes Syria, where he's on the phone with his parents, and all of a sudden the line goes dead, and he was captured and held hostage for 9 weeks. And it took a crazy, crazy ordeal, and a story that he's going to tell us coming up in a couple of minutes of how they were able to capture Sam Goodwin. He's written a book. It's called Finding Sam. You can find it anywhere you get your books. And I'm really looking forward to this interview. You know, I've been talking to Sam about this for several years. He's been on a speaking tour. He's doing a lot of different things. And I couldn't wait for the day that we finally get him on the show here on Hockey Sense. So looking forward to that. A couple things I want to get into before Sam gets here. First off, I want to give a big shout out to my guy, Jeff Merrick, man, from Sportsnet. A lot of you have maybe heard that he apparently is no longer with Sportsnet. There's kind of some gray area, some rumors floating around as to why he may not be there. We don't know the story. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know exactly why he's no longer working with Sportsnet, other than Sportsnet has confirmed that he no longer is an employee there. Jeff is one of the best in the business. I go way back with Jeff, more than 20 years. Back in the early 2000s when Mike Danton, if you remember, when he was arrested for allegedly trying to kill his agent. Remember, he hired a hitman to allegedly try to kill his agent? Ended up doing like 7 years, something like that in the federal penitentiary. And I was covering the case for KMOX Radio here in St. Louis. Ended up getting hired by a station in Toronto. And I was working with Jeff Merrick and Billy Waters very, very closely on Leafs Lunch. This is back like 2004, 2005. And covering the case for them. And that's how I got to know Jeff, and we have kept in touch over the years. You've heard him on this show. I can't tell you how many times. I've done his show so many times. One of the most talented people I've ever met in the industry, specifically when it comes to NHL coverage and hockey coverage altogether, at all levels. I mean, this guy is a hockey encyclopedia when it comes to the history of the game, when it comes to junior hockey, and obviously it spills over into the NHL as well. Always love talking with Jeff. He no longer works at Sportsnet. He's going to have plenty of options now. Somebody's going to want to hire this guy, and somebody will. So a big shout out to my guy, Jeff. Can't wait to talk to him and bring him back on the show very, very soon. Looking forward to that. Stan Bowman. You know, if you remember here in this very studio here at Half Coast Studios, we had Joel Quenneville on several weeks ago for his first public interview since essentially being suspended by the NHL. He's now been reinstated by the National Hockey League, so Joel Quenneville can be hired, although there were something like 8 coaches, something like that, who were hired this offseason, so the NHL conveniently reinstated Joel after there were no jobs available. It's like, hang on, Joel, we're thinking about it. Oh, there's no more jobs available? Now you're reinstated. Although Columbus technically was still available, Dean Everson just got the head coaching job there in Columbus. Give Dean a big shout out. Congratulations to him. He joined Cam Jansen and myself here on the Cam and Strick podcast several weeks ago. And I told you, Dean, I said, what'd I say? I said, you will get a job after you do this podcast. And he sent me a text after he got hired. He said, you told me I would get hired after I do the podcast. So he remembered, which is awesome. So congratulations. But my point is, Columbus was never going to hire Joel after the Mike Babcock fiasco. They weren't going to all of a sudden hire another coach who had been essentially kicked to the curb by the NHL. But now the NHL has reinstated both Stan Bowman, who was the GM of the Blackhawks at the time when Joel was the head coach, when all this stuff went down with Kyle Beach. But Stan Bowman was reinstated at the same time as Joel, and obviously the job was still available there with the Edmonton Oilers. I had been told for weeks that he was the front runner to get that job. I think this was pretty much planned. Everyone knew he was going to land in Edmonton. People were bringing up the names like Mark Hunter and some of these other guys, but listen, he was always going to end up with the Edmonton Oilers. I think most people realized that and knew that, which is why you saw this PR campaign that was taking place on social media by Sheldon Kennedy, another former guest of the Cam and Strick podcast, who has a very public, he's been very open about his experience being abused as a young hockey player. And now he helps a lot of other abuse victims and those who have been involved in, and I guess enabling abuse as well. I mean, so he's helped educate Stan Bowman for the last several months. They've worked very, very closely together. And he's been very publicly supportive of Bowman getting back into the NHL. He gave him an endorsement to the NHL. Sheldon Kennedy did, talking about Stan Bowman. He gave Bowman an endorsement with the Edmonton Oilers to get back into the NHL with the Oilers. And so now Bowman, a three-time Stanley Cup champion with the Chicago Blackhawks, is now the general manager of one of the best teams in the NHL and a team that just went to the Stanley Cup final in the Edmonton Oilers. He couldn't have found a better situation now, although he's got some challenges because he's going to have to get his two big dogs re-signed in Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Jeff Jackson, who's the president there, obviously was a longtime agent for McDavid. They brought in McDavid's former junior coach in the OHL with Erie. So listen, they've tried to surround McDavid with the pieces necessary to keep him there long term. And at the end of the day, listen, who knows how it's going to play out? I've said all along that I wouldn't be surprised if both players walked and left. They wouldn't be the first superstar to leave. But when Draisaitl signs, he's going to be the highest paid player in the NHL. And then when McDavid signs after Draisaitl, he will become the highest paid player in the NHL. So again, we'll see how that plays out. A couple things real quick with the Blues. The rookie tournament, traditionally they have gone to Traverse City, Michigan and played in that Traverse City Prospects tournament that they've had for years that was put on by the Detroit Red Wings. And they stopped doing that now. And last year they went to Minnesota and they had a 3-team rookie tournament with the Blackhawks, the Minnesota Wild, and the Blues. And so those 3 teams are now rotating in terms of who hosts the tournament each year. This year, it's the Blues' turn. So the Blues will be hosting the Prospects tournament coming up just before the start of NHL main camp, around September 17th, 18th, sometime, something in that range. So anyway, that's where we're at with the Prospect tournament. So be sure to head out and see Dalibor Dvorsky and all those guys skate. You're not going to see Jimmy Snuggerud because he won't be here because he's heading back to school. But any player, prospect who plays junior or is going to be playing in the American League this year or trying to make the NHL roster, those guys typically are involved in the Prospect tournament. And this would include Adam Jiricek, who the Blues just drafted 16th overall, who's headed to, which once was Hamilton in the OHL. Now they've moved to Brantford in the Ontario Hockey League, and they're coached by Jay McKee, the guy they call Cheese. Whether or not he's cleared to play and he participates in the tournament remains to be seen. I asked Doug Armstrong about that last week. They're not exactly sure. Hopefully he's involved or available for main camp, and maybe we can even see him play in a preseason game. Who knows? But Dvorsky obviously is going to be the big name as he's competing for a for a spot on the NHL roster. You got some of these Swedes. I don't know if they're going to participate or not because they may be into their season already over in Europe, certainly into camp by then. When you look at Theo Lindstein and Otto Stenberg, those are the first two names that come to mind. So, but again, a number of players who are going to be in main camp, including a number of the players just drafted a few weeks ago in the 2024 draft. Especially all those kids that are playing in the CHL. You got a number of players who are playing in the CHL from last season. Those guys will all be there. So looking forward to it. All right. As always, Hockey Sense is brought to you by First Community. Listen, they've got some hot rates right now. I like to always talk about the hot rates because they've got them at First Community. We talk about the Little Blues program, how involved they are in the game of hockey, but they've got these hot rates right now throughout the summer. If you got some money sitting around in a savings account or a cookie jar, do you have that? Is it in the mattress? Is it just sitting there? Hey, invest it and put it in a account with First Community. For as little as $500, you can open up a certificate of deposit and earn a really competitive rate. And unlike most high-risk investments, because there's a lot of those that are out there, the money is totally safe because it's guaranteed. So if you don't want to tie up your money at all, you should consider a money management account from First Community. They are the absolute best. And if you're looking for a job, they are one of the top places to work in St. Louis. They have been for a long time. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch, 12 straight years, has revealed their list of the top workplaces to work at here in St. Louis. And the top workplaces for 2024, First Community once again is on that list. So it's determined based on feedback directly from the employees. So when the employees tell you it's a great place to work, that's all you need to know. So check that out. First Community, proud sponsor, our title sponsor here on Hockey Sense, live from our studios here at Half Coast, baby. You want to host a podcast, man, get back to me. You got to come through me, though, and I'll hook you up, and we'll take care of it. I'll get you set up with Maddie and the whole crew, Alex, everybody, here at Half Coast, because they are the best in the business. You know who else is the best in the business? Four Hands Brewing Company. I'll be headed there soon for a party. They've got that new location in Kirkwood. Can't wait to see that one. Have you been out there yet? It's incredible. Food from Peacemaker, which sounds really, really good right now. Four Hands Brewing Company sponsors pretty much everything, including STL City. I'm going to an STL City game this weekend. First time I've ever been to an STL City game. I kind of hate to admit that. I've been to the park several times. I've seen international games, but I've never seen STL City play. Looking forward to that. All the year-round beers, all the seasonal beers are available at any other tap rooms, any other tasting rooms, including their flagship one in downtown St. Louis, 1220 South 8th Street. You can get to the Chesterfield location, the Kirkwood location, whatever it is. They've got the Mango Lemonade, the Cam and Strick podcast, Mango Lemonade Hard Seltzer. That's the best in the business. There has not been a better one than the Mango Lemonade Hard Seltzer. There's a lot of good seltzers out there. None better than the Mango Lemonade Cam and Strick podcast Hard Seltzer. Check that out. It'll be back for hockey season once again. Happy to always announce that. 314 Sports Cards. Devin Sant will not be able to join us this week. He is traveling. He's on assignment, as they say. Joseph Wool, the goaltender from the Toronto Maple Leafs, was at the store the other day. Did you see that? They got the best selection of hockey cards anywhere in North America. 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet. That's where you find 314 Sports Cards, best customer service. They've got couches, TVs. You can just go in there and chill, bring your kids. The kids love it. They're great with the kids. You can buy individual cards. You can buy Pokemon cards. Maddie, you may like those Pokemon cards, man. I don't know if you're into that or not. But they have them. But they got NBA, PGA, international soccer, obviously baseball cards, of course. But nobody does hockey cards like 314 Sports Cards. Check out their Instagram account, 314_sports_cards. That's their Instagram account. Check out all the new things happening there. Again, 9640 Olive Boulevard. Take your son or daughter in there and just hang out. You can get packs, you can get boxes, you can get the individual cards, whatever it is you want. All right, Dirt Cheap Fun, your one-stop party shop, baby. Some of these locations now have drive-thrus. A lot of them have the curbside pickup too, so you never have to get out of your car. I mean, how great would that be, to never have to get out of your car? Well, you can do that with Dirt Cheap. Don't sleep on the party supplies, by the way. And you think you got to go to this store or that? No. You can go to Dirt Cheap and get it all. Dirt Cheap Fun, your one-stop party shop. Best selection of beer, wine, and booze. They've got cigars. They've got lottery tickets. They got everything. They got that walk-in beer cooler. That's always a cool, like 34 degrees or something crazy like that. So get in there, and when it's hot out, there's no better place to be than inside the beer cooler at Dirt Cheap Fun Fun. Locally owned, the Wallace family. We'll give a shout out to the Wallace family. You notice that? All the sponsors we have here on Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community, they're all like local people who give back to the community. That's what we love about our friends over there at Dirt Cheap. STL Select Lawn and St. Louis Select Landscaping. I'll give my boy Greg Scheller a shout out. Tara, everybody over there. They are the best, man. I've checked out so many of their projects. I go in there, I just like to see the projects. People say, hey, listen, Greg did my backyard, turned my backyard into a backyard paradise. I want to check it out. And I do that. They can do pools, they can do the fire pits, the fireplaces, the paver patios. I have my coffee out there, man. It is incredible. And you should too. They got that surround sound. Sometimes the music is so clear you feel like you're at a concert, man. You're like, damn, where's that music coming from? And you look into the bush, far into the bush, man. You see these little black little circles. Like, what is that? That's the speaker. You can't even see them. And it's so clear, it's incredible. 636-376-4089. That's the phone number, stlselectlawn.com. Tell them I sent you over there at the one and only STL Select Landscaping. Again, stlselectlawn.com. That's the website. And also, Lordo's Diamonds. Get that special someone in your life, something special. They've been around for almost 70 years. Can you believe that? Now is a perfect time to pop the question. Nobody does engagement rings better than Mike and Jimmy Lordo. They are so patient with you. They are so good. I will never go anywhere else. And I haven't for a long, long time. But I mean it. They are so good to their customers. So good. And they continue to get it done. They're right there in the heart of Ladue. LordosDiamonds.com, 314-432-8008. It's never too early to start thinking about the holidays. They'll be here before you know it. You want to pop that question, get in there, take a look, know what she wants. And if you're a woman listening to this show and you think he's going to be popping the question, make sure you tell him what you want. Go into Lordo's, start looking at the rings, and let them, show you some examples and some different options for you to consider. Best deals, man. Best pricing. Tell them what your budget is. They'll take care of you. All right, let's step aside for a minute here. We're at Half Coast Studios. I'm looking forward to our conversation coming up with Sam Goodwin. He's got an incredible story to tell, and he's going to tell us next. I'm Andy Strickland. This is Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. We talked to Sam Goodwin. He's next. Don't go anywhere. All right, back here on Hockey Sense. And, I said in the first segment how much I'm looking forward to this conversation because Sammy Goodwin, he's my guy, long time, hockey family here in St. Louis. His brothers played. He had one brother that played at Penn State, another brother who played AAA here growing up, all doing great things. And, of course, Sammy was a Division I hockey player at Niagara University. Grew up through the AAA Blues system here in St. Louis. What high school?
Went to DeSmet.
Okay, I was going to say that. Did all of them go to DeSmet or no?
All three of us did.
Okay, I was going to make sure. So that's I should know that.
There was 1 year, all three of us were at DeSmet at the same time.
Yeah.
We all played on the same team.
Get out
Played
of here.
on a line.
Did
a couple
you?
games.
I got Paulie for the GWG, baby. That's my guy. And David, too, man, who had a hell of a career. And I followed him closely at Penn State. And is he still playing professionally now?
He just finished.
Where did he finish? Because he was in Finland for a long time.
He was in Finland for a couple years, then in Sweden, and then he finished in Belfast.
Okay.
For a few years.
So
good run.
See the world, man, right?
Absolutely.
And did you play hockey after college? Did you play overseas anywhere or no?
So I finished my, I would say, formal career at Niagara, but then the games remained a big part of my life. I took a job after college with a tech company in Singapore.
Yeah.
And actually, I didn't even bring my gear to Singapore.
Really?
I was like, I'm moving to the equator.
You're like, there's no hockey
There's no
there.
hockey here. I got there and found out that there was a league, a lot of Canadian, American, European expats, and they played there. And for the next 6-7 years, hockey was actually a big part of my life living in Southeast Asia.
In Singapore?
In Singapore.
Did
And that
you
was
meet
how I
other
met
hockey people?
Met lots of other hockey people, which was unexpected. I didn't even bring my gear. I'll tell you, when I found out there was a rink, it was like 2 weeks after I'd lived there, I called my dad and I said, hey, send me my gear.
Yeah.
And he was like, what?
You didn't go to like a Bauer Experience store in Singapore?
The
or
Bauer
Pure
Experience store in Singapore. And so he sent it over and kind of unexpectedly became a big part of my life.
Yeah, no, I bet. And you were teaching kids, right? How to play the game and doing camps and clinics and stuff?
Yeah, so we ran camps all over Asia and really helped to try to develop the game in a non-traditional market, which was really fun because these kids, they could watch hockey on TV, but there were limited resources. So we tried to do what we could to help grow the game there.
Okay, did that give you the itch to travel? Was that what it was, going to Singapore, or did you have it prior to that?
I had a little bit of that prior, but then it kind of took off in Singapore. I found myself in the heart of Southeast Asia in my early 20s, a little bit of flexibility, my work schedule, had the world's best airport in my backyard, and I just ran with it from there and took advantage of the opportunity to explore as much of the region and beyond as possible.
Yeah, okay. So you're in Singapore, but you had a career going, right? What was your career?
I was working for a tech company doing business development, fundraising, investor relations for a small tech company, and I loved it. It was great. In the margins, on weekends, holidays, any opportunity I had, I would just travel as much as I could.
Yeah, okay. And you were making money and whatever, right? You were able to finance your trips and do whatever you were doing. What was the first country you went to when you decided that you wanted to try to, reach every country in the world? Or were you already traveling, hitting some countries? And, when did you ultimately make that decision that you wanted to all of a sudden say, hey, set this goal for yourself to go to every country in the world?
It actually all happened very, very organically. I mean, my travel for me was the best education I've ever had. It was never about ticking boxes or checking places off a list, but I, just a personal preference, didn't like to repeat places. So even if I went somewhere and had a great experience, the next weekend or holiday, I would just go somewhere different. And I put this formula into play for about 6 years. And in early 2018, I realized that I had traveled to about 120 countries in the world. And it was at that point when I remember thinking, well, how many are there? I'd always traveled because it was fun and I enjoyed it.
How many are there?
But most importantly, I learned from it.
Yeah.
And I did some research. I learned that there are 193 fully recognized UN sovereign states. And at that point, I thought, well, maybe I could go to all of them. And then the competitive athlete kicked in, like setting goals and working toward achieving them.
Traveling by yourself for the most part?
Combination, sometimes by myself, sometimes solo, but also with family, friends, other travelers, kind of a range of different things.
You like traveling by yourself?
Pros and cons to both. So traveling solo, there's nothing better than doing what you want, when you want, exactly how you want.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, there's nothing like sharing that moment of discovery with other people.
Sure.
So it's a
and it can get lonely or whatever, so you want to hang out, especially when you go out to a bar or something, and
for sure.
It's always nice to have somebody there. But you're right. I'm with you. I went to Hawaii once by myself.
Oh, yeah? What'd you do?
And, well, we'll talk about you, but I had, what I do, basically just kind of hiked around the island, and jumped around from one island to the next for several months. So, and slept in a tent and you'd meet people, you trade things,
One thing that's great about being solo is it kind of forces you to meet new people.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're traveling with people, hanging with them. So pros and cons to both, for sure.
The longest flight you had was where?
I think probably Dallas to Hong Kong. About 16 hours. There are some that are longer than that.
Yeah.
I think Singapore Airlines recently reclaimed the longest from New York to Singapore, but roughly that's
It's funny you say 193, because I was reading that you're one of 100 people in the world, or in the history of the world, in the history of civilization, to have stepped foot in every country in the world. Now, I asked Alexa, they're telling me there's 195 countries. So I'm so confused. Alexa doesn't even know how many countries there are. So 193, what was the last country you went to?
My last country was Brazil, which was 193. There are a few different ways to calculate how many countries there are in the world. There are 193 fully recognized sovereign states. The other two to get to 195 typically are the Vatican and Palestine, which are observers. You can get to Taiwan, Kosovo, different places. You can use different lists, like the Olympics, which is starting. They have a different number, or FIFA has a different number, 214 or 209, something like that, or the ISO, like the URL codes, they have 149-ish. Don't quote me on all these numbers. I'm not 100% sure, but it just depends on what list someone wants to use.
Are you recognized for being one of only 100? Is there a list of people who have done this?
There are a few kind of extreme travel organizations that keep track of these things and just kind of bring the community of people together, but it's nothing super official.
Yeah.
I would say.
All right, so a couple things here. First off, before we get into your story, your favorite country you went to. Where would you say, like, hey, I could pick up and live there right now? Raise a family, do everything.
I mean, after the United States, raising a family and living, I mean, I really love Singapore because I live there, but I think Japan is a great option. And then a range of places in Western Europe are obviously comfortable to live in. Sometimes favorite country, though, I again, after the U.S., I often say New Zealand. I think it's the most naturally beautiful place in the world. And that's typically how I answer
Just beautiful,
that question. Around every corner is another postcard.
Oh my God!
It's worth every.
And people actually live there every day.
It's worth every second of effort that's required to get to its corner of the world.
Which is a shorter flight than getting to Hong Kong, right? Is that what you're saying?
Depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah, I guess you were in Dallas, right? So, but a flight from, I mean, to get to New Zealand, that's one of the longest flights you're going to take, right?
That's right. It's on the way to nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Hockey was always a part of your life. Going back to when? Like, how'd you guys get involved in the game?
So I started playing. My family, we lived in Northwest Ohio, so started playing in Toledo and Detroit area.
Okay.
And my dad had played a little bit, nothing competitive or too serious, but we got involved, and then it just kind of evolved from there. And then we moved from Ohio to St. Louis in 2001 and started playing here.
How old were you then?
So I would have been 13 roughly.
Yeah.
And since then, the community here has been a huge part of our lives. And I grew up, was so fortunate to be coached by some of the best coaches, I think, in the world, from Basil McRae, Rob Ramage, Jeff Brown, all these guys who stick around, as you know, as well as anyone, and been so huge in developing the minor hockey scene.
All had great NHL careers, long NHL careers.
For sure. And the hockey scene wouldn't be what it is today without them, as you know.
No question.
By the way, I skated with the Blues alumni this morning.
Yeah.
And I was looking to give you a backdoor tap in, but you weren't there.
I don't do the early morning ones.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, all right. I'll see you on Wednesday then. Right?
Yeah. Well, eventually. My kid skates every Wednesday. It's kind of like interfering with my getting back out there, but I need to because I'm playing in a charity game in a few weeks, actually. So I need to like get out there a couple of times.
Shake off the rust.
Yeah, but no, I'd like the early mornings actually would be perfect. Was Cam out there today?
He was out there.
How'd he do? Because I'm not getting the real story from him.
He was talking a big game.
Was he?
He's talking a big game.
No surprise.
He might have scored. He might have scored.
Oh, he might not have either.
He might not have either. It's hard to know.
I love it. He brings the fun though, man, when he's out there, right?
Oh yeah.
Does he load up the team still and make them unfair?
The blue team still just cheats a little bit.
Yeah.
Every game.
It's like the Globetrotters versus the Generals, you know?
They just cheat a little bit. I'm white for life.
Yeah.
That is my go-to.
Yeah.
And blue, they cheat a little bit and they still lose a lot. We still beat them a lot.
Listen, I heard you say it twice now and we haven't even gotten into your story, but you keep saying outside of the United States or beside the United States. Like after your experience, did you have a greater appreciation for what we have here in the U.S. or did you, I'm sure you always had it, but I'm sure it increased even a little bit after going to some of these, 193 other countries. You realize how good we have it here.
Totally, no doubt. And we have plenty of challenges and things to work through in our country, but there's no other place in the world, in my opinion, that has the opportunity that we have in the U.S. And that's something that I don't think any of us can take for granted. I feel fortunate to have that perspective to say that, but it's really so much about how much opportunity there is here versus anywhere else, in my opinion.
Did you sense when you would identify yourself as an American in some countries that you would get a look or people would treat you differently?
My experience was that people were always very curious and wanted to know, and I was treated very well as an American. And you hear other stories about the ugly American and the way that sometimes they travel around the world. But my experience was always really positive. A lot of people want to be American. They want to know about American culture. I think a lot of that comes to some degree from Hollywood. I think Hollywood is the ultimate soft power in the world. Nothing has been able to be everything to everyone the way that Hollywood has, and that's the way that a lot of people know the United States. But overall, was treated really well.
You went to North Korea. Now, before you go to North Korea, is anyone advising you not to go to North Korea? And how nervous were you in North Korea to make sure you didn't slip up and all of a sudden find yourself in an awful situation?
I was invited to North Korea in 2016. I was living in Singapore and was invited to coach their national hockey team. I actually went there through hockey. This is another way that hockey just continues to give back in my life.
So they have a hockey team. They have a national team in North Korea.
They have a national team. And
Okay.
was invited there. And to your question, there were advisories and people saying, hey, things can go sideways and you have to, keep your antennas up and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But my experience there was so positive. We were treated incredibly well. You've probably had Korean food. It's delicious. I'm not oblivious to the fact that I saw what they wanted me to see, and getting off that tourist track, so to speak, things can get
So
pretty
you were
grim.
on part of a program. So do you feel like you were insulated or protected?
Exactly. It was insulated, and we were on this kind of tourist track.
Okay.
But we spent a lot of time at the rink, a lot of time on the ice. The players, they skated well. They worked hard. They wanted to be there. They wanted to get better. I had a translator who helped me communicate with them, and it was such a memorable experience to use a sport, to use hockey as a way to build a cultural bridge.
Yeah.
And when that's just really special. A lot of times you travel somewhere and you just go and visit and and then that's great. But when you're able to engage with locals like that,
Yeah.
especially through a game that's been such a big part of my life, a very memorable experience.
How long were you there?
I was there for a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you see the stuff on TV, right? I mean, the hard labor, people are sentenced to hard labor and they're back in a courtroom. They can't even sit up straight, can't even walk. Right?
Totally. And that's happening. Those things are happening. But one of the most significant things that I've learned is that through my travels is that oftentimes the places that are negatively perceived or that Western media tells us we're not supposed to like, those were the places where I had many of my best experiences.
Okay.
For example, I camped at the base of Angel Falls in Venezuela. I coached the North Korean national hockey team. I coached volleyball in Afghanistan. I celebrated New Year's Eve in Iran. And these are places that typically we only see the negative things. And there's plenty of instability. There are authoritarian regimes causing all kinds of instability. But underneath that, there are a lot of other things happening too. And I think it's really important to try and understand those. And potentially one of the most significant things that I've learned through my travels is that the overwhelming majority of people in the world are well-intentioned, proud of their country, happy to help others. We're all fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
And that was what I found in North Korea as well.
How much do you think it cost you to travel to every country in the world?
God, I don't. It was over like a 10 or 12 year period. So I don't know, but it was very spread out. The end of it, when kind of it became this goal to go to all of them, the end of it was more condensed. But before that, I was always working, focused on my career.
Yeah.
Travel was just a weekend holiday thing. So it was spread out over like 10 weeks.
Never a scary experience in any of these countries where things almost really went sideways for you from a political standpoint?
I mean, there were plenty of times when I felt uncomfortable. For example, I was in 2018 in the summer, I was in Haiti in Port-au-Prince. And the day I was there, the government sanctioned a nationwide spike in fuel prices. And as the most developing country in the Western Hemisphere, this was a huge deal for the local population. And so there were riots in the streets. There were cars on fire, intersections were blocked, and there was pretty significant instability. And I stayed locked inside the hotel I was at for about 3 days.
You did.
And was looking outside at people rioting, throwing rocks, all kinds of different things.
You get some good footage of that.
I have pictures and all this stuff. And so it's there's something that I got caught up in, and thankfully, I didn't have any major threats to my direct safety. I was safe in the hotel, but those kinds of things are just...
You getting DoorDash in...
ordering DoorDash at the hotel in Port-au-Prince?
Probably not, right?
Didn't work that way.
You ever think about being a journalist?
I don't know. I would need to learn to ask questions like you ask questions.
Well, I mean, a lot of these journalists, they travel around the world and like they're reporting live on the scene when like, grenades are going on behind them and stuff like that. And people are rioting, like you said.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're looking for people to.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does. I've come to know quite a few journalists over the years, and it does. That perspective, I think, is important because sometimes I think we look at our Twitter feeds and we think that the information here just kind of shows up magically.
Right.
But there's actually someone, as you said, out there, potentially in harm's way, potentially in a risky situation, that's bringing that information to us. And what would we be without those journalists doing that? We wouldn't know.
So you eventually found your way to Syria, but I'm curious when you hear news reports. Whether it's Brittany Griner in Russia, you've got a Wall Street Journal journalist, I believe, who's in being held in Russia right now. Just got sentenced, I think, to 16 years, something like that. So, what goes through your mind when you hear these reports and you see this stuff and you read it? Do you get flashbacks? I mean, do you think about it? What do you think they're going through right now?
One of the things I'll quickly mention about Evan is that. In my opinion and experience, my analysis is that recent sentencing of 16 years is not going to matter because this is a hostage situation and he's going to be in Russia only as long as it takes Washington and Moscow to make a deal. That? I think he's been told that and is probably aware. The other thing is that this is typical of the Russians to lay a very harsh sentence on someone.
Right.
And what they do is they artificially inflate their importance. So now they say, this is someone who's been sentenced to 18 years, he's a spy or whatever they say. So then they can have a more significant bargaining chip when they try to get, Victor Bout or another merchant of death as in a swap. So there's a range of things going on. But when I hear these stories, it does put things in perspective for me, and I realize how fortunate I was that my situation ended peacefully. But I also I'm connected with kind of the most elite club that nobody ever wants to be a part of, but we try to support each other and help the families, help the returning hostages when they come home.
You talk to other families.
Try to talk to them and support them because one thing that's important to remember is for every one of these hostages or wrongful detainees, there's also a family that's going through the hardest thing they've ever gone through in their life. And they don't know what to do. Same thing that happened to my family. So we try to support them in the best ways that we can.
Okay. You find your way to Syria. You enter Syria, no issues whatsoever when you cross the border. Were you aware of the potential threat of going to a country like Syria?
So I think for me, safety was always the top priority, as it can be, as much as it can be on a journey like this. I knew there was always a risk of something could happen anywhere. Of course, I was aware of the decade-long conflict that had been ravishing the country. I went to the Northeast, which was hundreds of miles from any ongoing conflict, but still, there's always a chance that something could happen. I didn't feel as though I was in any danger when I got there. It was a very calm, normal day.
Traveling solo.
I was traveling solo, but I was planning to meet up with a guide. But I was solo until I was meeting up with him.
So they have a guide in Syria who will take you around Syria. You think if the guide was with you, you wouldn't have had any issue?
Potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when were you going to meet up with the guide?
I was on my way to meet up with him.
When you got picked up?
When I was taken, yeah.
Okay, so you set the scene, you're at the hotel, you leave the hotel, you're talking to your mom on the phone, and what happens?
I was walking through a roundabout, as I mentioned, on the way to meet up with my guide, and all of a sudden, this black pickup truck abruptly pulled up next to me. These two armed men jumped out of the back seat and instructed me to get inside. Thankfully,
like in an aggressive way, they jump out and
thankfully they weren't violent, but at the same time, I didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
and I was scared, confused. I had no information or anyone to help. I was frankly desperately trying to understand what was happening.
No English.
A little bit of English, very broken. But as we when we got in that car, as we sped down back alleys of the city, the officers in the vehicle who had taken me off the street, they accused me of espionage, of being an American spy and collaborating with terrorists, and nothing like that had ever happened to me before.
And you're trying to say, hey, I'm not and are they not understanding you? They're just not believing you?
A combination of both.
Are they saying you can make a phone call? It's not like here in American jail or whatever, hey, you can call your lawyer, nothing like that, right?
Nothing like that at all.
So you're thinking in your mind, what is my family thinking, right? Or are you more like, where am I going? Like, where did they put you? Where'd you sleep that night?
So yeah, a combination of both. Like, where am I going, but also who might be able to help. So I was taken pretty immediately. I was thrown into the cargo hold of a plane, and I was flown from that region of the country to Damascus, the capital city.
How long was that flight?
About 90 minutes. And I remember being in the belly of this plane and trying to
what do you mean the cargo? Like where they put the luggage and stuff?
Yeah.
You're not in a seat.
I was kind of on this like jump seat, but with all the luggage.
Are the individuals who captivated you? Are they with you? Or are you by yourself?
They had one guy they put on the plane to just like watch me.
Okay.
Basically.
Are you in handcuffs or anything or no?
I was handcuffed at that point. Yeah.
In the front.
Ties. In front. Yeah. Okay. In front. And
for the whole 90-minute flight.
For the whole 90 minutes. And I remember I was trying to. It's interesting now. Like there are these kind of moments of humor, which I feel so grateful now. It's 5 years later. I can actually make light and kind of reflect on some of the humorous moments. But I remember trying to lighten the mood just a little bit amidst being terrified. And I said, I was like, gosh, I don't think I'm going to get frequent flyer miles for this flight.
Probably not.
Probably not. So anyway, there was these small moments of humor. It lifted my spirits for about 2 seconds, and then I was kind of back in the situation, but tried to lighten the mood a little bit.
You don't know where you're going.
Had no idea. Let me ask you this, Stricky. How often have you been flying on an airplane and not known where it was going?
Yeah, I don't think ever.
That was a situation I was in. This just overwhelming cloud of uncertainty was growing all around.
How'd you find out where you were when you landed?
We landed about 90 minutes later. I was put in a car. I was driven away from the airport. And when we were driving, I saw a sign on the side of the road, and it said Damascus with an arrow pointing forward. And that was when I thought that I knew where I was.
And right then and there, if not before, I mean, from the time that they jumped out of the vehicle and put you in there, you're in serious trouble here.
I was beginning to realize that I was in serious trouble. I was still at that point hopeful that it would get sorted out, and then that I'm just a traveler. I'm not any kind of threat to their national security as they accused me of being, and I thought it would just get sorted out.
So your first night, you sleep in a jail cell there. When do they start interrogating you and all that?
I spent the next 23 days in solitary confinement.
Okay.
An 8x8 prison cell, no window. It was all concrete. I had nothing but a small blanket to lay on the concrete floor as a bed. And the only human interaction I had during those 3 weeks was when the guards brought bread and boiled potatoes and water for about 10 seconds.
Did you eat?
I did. Yeah,
you were eating.
Just very basic, simple, low-calorie diet, and but I did have just enough.
How were you keeping your sanity? Like, were you emotional all day long? Were you trying to plead your case with the guards? Were you not saying anything?
It was a range of things. It was all of the above. There were a range of things that I did to pass time. I would pretend the cell was full of people and tell stories. I would recall hockey games that I played in from start to finish, everything I could remember, from the way I taped my stick, who my line mates were, what my coach was saying, who we were playing against, and just try to put myself back into that moment, because any moment that I could be somewhere else, I wasn't.
Escape, yeah.
Escape, exactly. I spent a lot of time saying prayers. I spent time eating. I did exercise, I did push-ups, sit-ups, core exercises. And I established this routine, actually. And that routine became so important in the same way. It may be a little bit counterintuitive, but in the same way that I think a routine is so important for our professional lives or for our athletic lives or our personal lives, that routine became so important in that cell as well.
So are they coming in and talking to you every day, or are there some days where you just have zero interaction? They're not questioning you. They're not interrogating you.
For the first 23 days, there was nothing.
Nothing.
It was other than about 10 seconds in the morning and evening with the guards. There were occasionally a couple times when a different person came in for a minute or two.
And when's the last time you had been to St. Louis prior to that, right? You're a hockey fan, so this is all going on with the Blues' run to the Stanley Cup final. So where are we in the playoffs right now? And do you even know what date it is and when the Blues are playing and all of that?
So before I went to Syria, I was traveling and I was watching the Blues when I could from St. Louis, hockey player, following the Blues, run to the Stanley Cup. I watched them beat the Sharks in the Western Conference Final from Iraq. I watched the hand pass, everything.
Okay.
And I knew that they were going to the final. And in between the Western Conference Final and the final was when I went to Syria. And I knew when the first 4 games were because they were scheduled. And so actually, when I was taken, one of the most significant and important things for a hostage is to maintain some kind of emotional connection to the outside. And I was doing this in a range of ways, from thinking about my family or how I might get out. But one of the other ways I did this was actually thinking about the Blues. And frankly, I have to say, I was in a situation where I didn't really care because there were so many more things that were much more important. I was trying to stay alive and thinking about my family. But again, this connection to the outside was so important. So I knew when those first 4 games were, and I actually made these small marks on the inside of the cell wall to just mark the days when those games were. And that helped me kind of just think about what might be happening or how the games might be going.
So you felt like you knew what day it was, what day of the week, what the date was. Could you ask the guard, hey, what day is it? What's the date today? Would you ever ask?
I started to keep track by when the food was being brought. I kind of identified the days, and I kept track on my calendar on the wall with this rock that I chipped off of the days. And that was another way that I stayed connected to the outside, because that was so important to maintain that connection. And then on days when I thought those games might be happening, I made little marks. And I remember I had the first 4 set, but then I didn't know the next 3 because maybe they're taking 1 day off, or maybe they're taking 2 days
between games.
It's travel, it's Boston, and then I was thinking after the 4th game, Blues probably got swept, so it's over, right? And then maybe they didn't though. Maybe it's and so again, maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but that I found a little bit of strength in that connection
to the Blues,
to the
Stanley Cup run. And you're using a rock, so there was a rock in the cell.
I chipped a rock off the inside of the cell wall, and then I used that to carve the rest of it.
How did you sleep?
Interestingly, in solitary confinement, I slept relatively well. And when I reflect on that, I think the main reason for that was because I was so emotionally and psychologically exhausted by the time it was, I thought it was night, time to go to bed, that I actually slept relatively well. And one of the metaphors that I sometimes use is, imagine if you were to walk out of this door right now and someone was standing on the other side and they jumped out and scared you, right? And be like, and you have this heightened hypersensitivity, hyper emotion. It was that sustained for 3 weeks. And so I was exhausted. It was
Books,
exhausting.
magazines, nothing.
Nothing.
Okay, so 23 days, and then what happens?
On day 23, they came and got me, and they said, come with me. And they took me upstairs to the street level. I was handcuffed behind my back and blindfolded. And they sat me down in a chair. And from across the room, a man started speaking to me in perfect English. And I don't know to this day exactly where he came from or who he was.
Had no idea what he looks like.
Never saw him. I talked to him for 3 hours on day 23 and 3 hours on day 24. Never saw him. If I heard his voice right now, I would know it in a second.
You would.
But I've never seen him.
Mm-hmm.
And he, on these 2 days, he interrogated me for hours.
What are they asking?
It started with him basically starting with the day I was born and asking me questions about my entire life, where I lived, where I played hockey, where I went to school, what my jobs were, why I came to Syria, my travel journey, all these things. Mm-hmm. I answered everything truthfully. And they basically were trying to determine it seemed they were trying to determine if I was who I was saying I was.
Are you keeping it together when you're answering these questions? Are you emotional? What's your...
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. Being both handcuffed
mm-hmm.
and blindfolded is an incredibly vulnerable position to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sometimes struggled to I remember my mouth getting kind of dry. There were some other people in the room, but I didn't know who they were. I didn't know if I had a gun to my head.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything,
mm-hmm.
but I tried to maintain some composure and just answer questions as directly as I could.
Okay, so you answered these questions. There's 2 days of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how long was each interrogation session, you think?
I think it was about 3 hours on each day.
Okay, and then and then you get back to they take you back to your cell, and then
mm-hmm.
they take the blindfold off and the handcuffs off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then what? I mean, so that's day 23 and 24. How long total were you held hostage?
I was held for 9 weeks for 63 days.
Okay, so we're just over 3 weeks. 3 weeks in. You got 6 weeks to go. Do you stay in this prison throughout the entire 9 weeks? And what happens after the interrogation session? Now, moving forward, are they talking to you or are they just leaving you alone now?
After the interrogation, there was another 3 days in solitary of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, I was moved to what I learned to be a federal prison.
Okay.
Outside of the city.
Other prisoners around.
I was put in a cell with about 40 other men.
Really?
And I was here for the next roughly 35 days for the rest of what proved to be
with
the rest of my time.
With 40 other people. Anybody speak English amongst the 40 people?
They did.
So did that had to be a little refreshing, right?
It was an upgrade.
Yeah.
Overall, it was an upgrade. It brought with it its own challenges because
mm-hmm.
there was no privacy and there was weird people. Some of them were weird personalities, right? But overall, it's an upgrade.
No violence, nothing like that.
No violence, and perhaps counterintuitively, these were some of the most incredible people I'd ever met.
Mm. Why were they being held? Americans?
No, all Syrians.
Mm-hmm.
Virtually none of them were true criminals. They were just victims of a corrupt system and had been caught up in the instability of the conflict.
They would talk about it, and they treated you with respect, right? Even though you're an American, they weren't like you were kind of part of the crew right off the bat, right?
They treated me so well, and I'll never forget, about 2 weeks into the second month, I said to one of these guys who had become a friend of mine, I said, hey, everybody here is so nice to me. It was just a little bit hard to know what to expect in a situation like this. And I'll never forget, he said, Sam, in Syria, all the good people are here in prison because all the bad people are outside putting us in here.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so then, are you there for the duration then?
For the rest of my time, I'm here in this federal prison.
And any communication back home whatsoever?
There was a little bit of communication.
Mm-hmm.
I managed to smuggle out just a little bit of communication,
mm-hmm.
and a very quick story. So, actually, the same guy who made that comment about the good people and the bad people, he came to me one day and he said that he could get a note out of the prison, and he told me that the next day was visitor day,
mm-hmm.
and he had a friend coming who was going to bring him clean laundry,
mm-hmm.
and my fellow inmate was going to give him dirty laundry, and he said he could take a letter and put it in his dirty laundry and smuggle it out. And so he had my attention very quickly.
How risky is that?
I believe that he could have been in trouble for helping facilitate this, but he truly risked his life to help save mine. And this is kind of a testament of these people. So I took a pen and a piece of paper, and I wrote a couple things on there. I wrote my dad's name and his phone number. I wrote where I was and need some help. And I gave it to him, and he looked at it and he said, "Okay, Sam, this is good, but you should put a clue on this note so that if it makes it to your dad, he'll know for sure that it came from you." And I took it back and I was like, gosh, that's a great idea. I've never been in this situation before, but that's really helpful. So I wrote on there. I only had about 5 seconds to write this clue, but I actually wrote on the bottom of this letter, I said, "I always order the salmon at the Missouri Athletic Club."
Okay. So he would know that.
And I gave it to him. It went out. I didn't hear what happened. I never heard anything back. Later, when I was released, my parents told me, "Hey, we received this note from you."
Wow. That's
it
amazing.
had gotten there. And they said when they saw the clue, they basically took it straight to the FBI, who was basically on speed dial at that point, and said, "Hey, we have this note. We are 100% sure that it came from Sam because of the clue."
Okay. That's amazing. And we're going to fast forward. Again, everything's in the book here.
Yes.
Finding Sam, too. What's going on back home? What are they doing to try to find you?
So one of the most overwhelming things for me when I was released was learning about all of the people who were involved on the outside while I was stuck on the inside, all of which I knew nothing about when I was being held. And now when I hear about everything that happened, sometimes I feel like I had the easy part because they had to deal with everything that was going on. So the news of my disappearance was essentially learned through me going dark. I was always very good about keeping in touch, especially if I was in more of an unstable place. I had said that I was going to be in Syria for a few days, and when that time passed and they weren't hearing from me, they began to worry. My father works in civil engineering. My mother's a registered nurse turned educator. Both of them they're smart people, but they're a normal family from St. Louis. They had no idea what to do when their son went missing in the Middle East, but thankfully they began to act and they reached the FBI field office here in St. Louis, and it pretty quickly escalated some of the highest levels of the U.S. government in Washington. My family had kind of a roller coaster experience with the U.S. government, but early on, the government communicated two key things to my family. They said, first, we strongly recommend that you keep this out of the news. Keep all the communication very tight, because if Sam's captors, depending on who they are, feel that type of pressure, they might just kill him. The second thing they said was, you should really manage your expectations, because we have no diplomatic or economic ties with Syria. There may not be a whole lot we can do. Fast forward about 3 weeks, and my younger sister, Stephanie, who was 25 years old at the time, she was living in Nashville. She became entirely overwhelmed with everything that was happening. She decided that she needed to call someone, talk to them about this, which was against
the advice,
the advice of the U.S. government. So she decided she was going to call her former college roommate, who is coincidentally also named Stephanie. So there was this phone call between the Stephanies, and it's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And my Steph says, "Hey, like things aren't very good, actually. My brother's been missing for weeks. Nobody's heard from him. We're working with all these agencies, officials. Nobody's been able to help." And roommate Steph is, of course, shocked to hear this, but says all the right things, offers her full support. And at the end of the call, as the story goes, roommate Steph says, "Hey, if there's anything I can do, just let me know." And my Steph responded almost jokingly or sarcastically. She said, "Well, unless you know someone who knows Assad, the Syrian president, please just pray." And roommate Steph says, "Wait, let me call you back." And it turns out that roommate Steph is Lebanese, and her uncle is good friends with the head of Lebanon's internal security, kind of like the equivalent of the FBI here in the U.S. And he was able to mediate my release with the Syrians.
Really?
When so many others.
And
were
he was
struggling
living
to-
over there, or was he living here?
He's Lebanese.
Have you
He's
met
part
him?
Lebanese. Yeah, I have. He's
Okay.
become a friend.
Very good
Become a friend.
I would
Yeah.
imagine. Have you ever kept in touch with any of the other prisoners?
So I'm really grateful to say I'm in touch with quite a few of them today.
Okay.
And
Are they still?
so some of them are still in, the ones who have been released, some of them are still in Syria, some of them have fled to Lebanon or Turkey or into Europe. My mom and I actually went to Turkey last summer and met up with two of them, which
Wow.
was incredible. One of them recently invited me to his wedding in Damascus, which I don't think I'm going to make it, unfortunately.
Probably
but
not. Yeah.
Probably not going to make it.
Yeah.
But really just incredible people.
Okay, so the day you get released, how'd that go down?
It was 5 years ago today,
Which is amazing.
July 26, 2019.
Which I didn't know when I said, "Hey, can you let's do this today?"
Come to the studio
I had
on
no
Friday.
idea.
Yep.
Today's the 5-year anniversary of your freedom.
Yeah. The free anniversary, which I didn't know that was a term
Okay.
until this. But one of the officials came to the cell I was in. He called my name. He indicated that I was being moved, and as he escorted me out front, I'll never forget. He stopped and he said, "Sam, you're very lucky. President Assad has agreed to release you."
He said that before you even left the prison.
Before we even left, as we were walking outside. And this kind of sounds encouraging, but I had been lied to so many times
Okay.
in the past
So
2
you
months.
weren't 100% sure.
I wasn't 100% sure. I
Yeah.
had kind of become immune to believing anything like this. But outside, I stepped into this black SUV, which it turned out to be part of a 5-vehicle convoy that raced out of Damascus at what seemed to be 100 miles an hour. I mean, we didn't stop at traffic lights.
What were they? Were they federal agents? What were they?
What I learned is that they were part of Lebanon's general security. They were Lebanese special forces.
Mm-hmm.
And this was all a result of my sister's phone call
Get out of here.
that had made it to
When she
the
broke
head of
the
Lebanon.
rules.
When she broke the rules.
It's okay to break the rules occasionally.
Occasionally, yeah. And so we drove towards the mountains. Nobody said a word.
Do you know where you're going or where you are?
The nice cars and the professional nature of the operation made me think that this was either really good
Mm-hmm.
or really bad.
And you're not handcuffed or anything.
I was not handcuffed. I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I felt like I was about to experience one extreme of the captivity spectrum,
Yeah.
but I didn't know which one it was.
Mhm.
So we came up to this checkpoint. Seemed to be some kind of significant border, and as we passed through, the officer in the vehicle, he just tapped me on the leg, and he said, "Sam, you're in Lebanon. You're safe now."
So they speak English too.
He spoke English, yeah.
And when he said that to you, are you believing him now?
This was also very encouraging, but I was still trying to put all the pieces together. And we drove from there for about another hour into Beirut, the capital city of Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taken to the office of Lebanese Internal Security.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, quick story, what happened before that was I was taken to a hotel in Beirut,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of the special forces guys escorted me up to a room, and I took a shower, and it was this beautiful hotel in Beirut.
Oh, a nice hotel.
A nice hotel, very nice hotel. And when I got out of the shower, because
Are
of
they
this,
in the hotel room
they
with you?
came into the hotel room with me. Two of them
Did you
were.
have clothes to
No, I just put on
The
what I
same
had.
clothes,
Put on the same thing.
the prison clothes, basically?
I was in just my normal civilian clothes that I had been taken in.
They gave them back to
63
you.
days earlier.
What about your backpack and all that?
Backpack's another story.
Okay.
I'll come back to it in just a second if you want to
Yeah.
you want to hear that. But when I got out of the shower, I had a little bit of, there was a scheduling glitch, and we had a few minutes to kill. We were just kind of sitting there, and I asked the head of the special forces. I said, "Hey, can I borrow your phone for a second?" And he said, "Sure," and he gave it to me. And my first instinct was to try to make a phone call.
Because you hadn't talked to your family. They didn't know at this time, did they?
I hadn't had any communication. So my first instinct was to try to make a phone call, but I thought, maybe that's off limits. I don't want to cause any issues here. I don't know what it is. So after 9 weeks of being totally cut off from the world and with access to the internet for the first time, I opened up YouTube and I typed in 2019 Stanley Cup Final. And the first video that popped up had been posted 6 weeks earlier. And when I read the title of the video, I thought, oh my gosh, they won.
What did the title say? St. Louis Blues win
Stanley Cup champions.
So
I thought there must have been a parade.
So when you moved to the prison with the general, with the 40 other people, you still didn't know? Like, you couldn't ask anybody, like, what happened in the Stanley Cup final?
I wasn't able to facilitate that type of communication.
They're like, what is the Stanley Cup final?
What is the Stanley Cup
So,
final?
wow.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you do. You get the phone, not call home and not call your parents.
I mean, that's what I wanted to do.
But you wanted to see who won the Stanley Cup. So, and then when do you see your family? When do you talk to your family?
We went from the hotel to the general security office. And when I walked into the office, in addition to dozens of government and military intelligence officials and journalists, my parents were there.
Wow. So somebody had told them, hey, he's going to be released, and they had enough time to travel all the way over there.
They traveled very quickly and met that morning. And it was overwhelmingly emotional, a moment that many people thought would never happen.
So then you travel back to the States with your family?
With my family.
Have you ever talked to a president or anything like that? I mean, any major significant government officials who reached out to you?
Trump had me to the White House, and I talked to him after I came home.
Wow.
And it was very memorable to talk with the President of the United States, and was really grateful for that invitation. And his administration and the current administration have both prioritized this issue, and it's incredibly bipartisan. It's nonpartisan. Essentially, everyone agrees that bringing a wrongfully detained American home safely is a critical cause, and the U.S. government's top hostage negotiator was actually hired by the Trump administration, but then kept on in the Biden administration, and that kind of speaks to the nonpartisan nature of this issue. So I did have that opportunity when I came home.
Okay. And then what opportunities have been presented to you since? You're doing a lot of public speaking. If people want to see you speak, is there a website they can kind of see your schedule?
Yeah, can connect on social media, and this had a pretty profound impact on myself and my family. And I don't feel so much survivor's guilt as I feel survivor's responsibility. I feel like I was given this for a reason. I view the world through a spiritual lens. I feel like I survived this for a reason, and I'll probably be working to uncover all of those details forever. But my effort and my time right now is really reflecting on this story and this experience and all of my experiences, and trying to pull out messages and lessons that I think can be helpful to others.
And this is kind of like your new career, right? I mean, you're doing a lot of public speaking, and you wrote a book, again, Saving Sam. If people want to check this out, you can get this anywhere you can buy your books, right? You can find Saving Sam. Amazing story. And the embrace with your family, I'm sure, is something you'll never forget, right?
No doubt. I sometimes say that if this story happened to ever be adapted for something on screen as a film, what happened in that office, nothing will need to be dramatized. It could be played out exactly the way it happened. We could just play the CCTV footage inside of Lebanon's general security and just put it on the screen. That's the way that I remember it.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And now you're safe. And to see your brothers and your sister, they didn't come over, right? So they didn't see you till you got back to the States, right?
Just my parents made it over, but came back, and they had come in from St. Louis and different places, and they had been a big part of this as well. And actually, in the book, it's really two stories. It's about what's happening to me on the inside, but also everything that they were experiencing on the outside, and that's how the book's kind of told through these parallel stories.
What if somebody were to ask you your advice on if they should travel to Syria?
To Syria, I would say you may want to be sure that you're with the right people, or maybe just not go at this time. But it's a little bit heartbreaking. One of the challenges that I have with my story is how I portray the country of Syria, because this is a place that's incredibly culturally, historically, religiously significant. It's the cradle of civilization. It's mentioned more than 300 times in the Bible. But over the past now 13 years, they've had so much instability, so much conflict. It's heartbreaking. But this is a place that's not used to war. There's really incredible people. Some of the best hospitality that I've experienced anywhere in the world has been across the Middle East. So maybe not right now, but I hope to have the chance to experience in a different way.
Right. A couple more things real quick. From the time you saw your family, how long before you're on a flight to come back to the States?
It was the next day.
So you stayed the night at the hotel?
Stayed the night in Beirut.
At the nice hotel?
At the nice hotel.
Did you have a cocktail? Did you have a beer? Did you? Did you celebrate?
We went out to a nice to a nice Lebanese dinner that night. Lebanese food's
Did
one
you
of
eat
my
the
favorites.
salmon?
Had the salmon when I came back.
I bet you
had
did.
the salmon last night at the MAC.
Oh, did you?
Actually, yeah. But we also went to this place called Saint Charbel Monastery, which is a beautiful monastery on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
So just enjoyed our time together, kind of reflecting on everything that had happened.
And your experience as a hockey player, you think that helped you, right?
No doubt. One of the there were a range of things that I leaned on for strength throughout all of this. And one of those was the skills and traits I developed from being a competitive athlete, the mental toughness, critical thinking, resilience. How often do we have a boss or a coach tell us, control what you can control? Athletes have this unusual ability to deal with failure and being told no. And all of that was helpful. We often hear CEOs say all the time that they like to hire athletes, I think, because of a lot of these situations. And I am very thankful for the coaches that I had and the way that they developed me as a person and as an athlete, because that's helped me in so many ways in my personal life, in business as an entrepreneur, that roller coaster, and of course at truly rock bottom, literally and figuratively. And I would be a different person without that.
And I'm sure you've met some other amazing people who have experienced similar hostage situations and whatnot, right?
It's worked its way into my life in a meaningful way. And as I mentioned, it's kind of a club of people that I didn't really know existed, but it's a really incredible community of people. They're very dynamic, they're very sophisticated, and we all support each other.
30 seconds. Where's the backpack?
The backpack is here. It's with me. It's a North Face backpack, and that bag has been to every country in the world.
Okay, so you got it back.
I got it back.
Everything was in it?
Everything was in
Wow.
it. Actually, the U.S. intelligence got it back.
It did.
Yeah.
Like before you even left Lebanon.
Through the efforts of my family working on it, they had got it out of the hotel. So
glad you're safe, buddy. And,
thanks, and
you know, and I'm glad you finally got to come in and tell your story. It's an amazing story. Again, Finding Sam Goodwin, just an incredible story. Pick up this book and read it for yourself. Sam, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tricky.
Appreciate it. All right, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sam Goodwin, who's still here, by the way. But as always, brought to you by First Community and Four Hands Brewing Company, 314 Sports Cars, all our great sponsors that we have. Arco Construction built the beautiful Centene Community Ice Center where Sam was skating this morning with the Blues alumni. Of course, the Two Sheep facility out there in Chesterfield as well. So get out there and check that out. Arco Construction, taking St. Louis hockey to the next level, one ice rink at a time. Of course, Travel House, if you're looking to get a new vacation plan, do it today. Travelhouse.com. That's HAUS, no matter where you're looking to go. Except maybe, a few places. Maybe we wouldn't encourage you to. But if you're looking for a beach vacation, spring break, something like that, they can certainly help you with that. Travel House, HAUS, and all our great friends that help us bring on this, show, obviously, here at the Half Coast Studios. We appreciate everybody, including our title sponsor, First Community. Real quick, I was in contact with your dad, Sam, and when you got released, and I didn't know you were held captive. I mean, to your point where they kept it a secret, nobody knew. And then I got a call from, I believe, Scott Sanderson, who a longtime AAA coach, one of my good friends, and coached you and your brothers, and one of the best people from our hockey community here in St. Louis. And I reached out to your dad. I was like completely like, oh my God. And maybe your brothers as well. And he gave me a statement that he said I could tweet out. So I tweeted it out that you were safe, not knowing that it was going to like blow up. And now I'm getting people reaching out from all the major news networks, stuff. I'm like, I don't really know the story. I just know that he's safe. So
I remember when we were flying home and my dad was texting you on the phone because I had mentioned to him kind of what I was saying a few minutes ago about how there were a range of things that I leaned on for support, but one of those was what I had developed through being a competitive athlete. And I was particularly naming some of the coaches from St. Louis who had helped me, and they had been hard on me. They had developed me as a person and as an athlete. And I leaned on that at my lowest point, truly at rock bottom. And I would have been in a different situation without it. And I mentioned that to my dad on the plane on the ride home, and he texted you that, and then that's what you tweeted out. Which was,
yeah, I gotta find that tweet. Yeah. Okay. Amazing, man. Great to see you.
Thanks, Tricky.
Sam Goodwin, Finding Sam.
Saving Sam.
Saving Sam. Do I keep saying Finding Sam?
Sorry.
And now you correct me for the first time? Saving Sam. Leave it to me to mess up the title when it's right in front of my face. For Maddie, Alex, Aiden, everybody here at Half Coast Studios, we appreciate everybody's support. And of course, our friends over at First Community. Saving Sam. Get the book.
Awesome.